Hello, David here, and today we're going to be talking about the Spitfire 97A 60mm radial full shape. I'm going to start off by saying that this is a wheel that I like for a lot of the reasons that I like the Powell Dragon 93A 60x42mm wheel. However, these are far from the same wheel, but for context, I'm going to be comparing these two wheels throughout this review. And I do want you to watch this video all the way to the end, because at the end I'm going to address the 58mm 99A Spitfire conical fulls. Alright, so the specs on this Spitfire wheel are 60mm diameter, 97A durometer, 42mm width, 29mm contact patch, and these weigh 398 grams per set. This is a symmetrical wheel with a center set bearing seat. So here's a side-by-side comparison of the specs between the Powell Dragon 60x42mm and this 60mm Spitfire radial full. These have the same 60mm diameter. The Spitfires are a little bit harder at 97A compared to the 93A Dragon formula. They are the same width. The Spitfires have a slightly narrower 29mm contact patch compared to the 30mm Dragon formula contact patch. And a set of these Spitfire wheels weighs just 9 grams less than the Powell Dragon 60x42mm wheels. These cost $47, whereas the Dragon formula tends to run about $45. Alright, so color options on these Spitfire wheels. There's usually only maybe 1 or 2 color options you can choose from at a time. Spitfire makes tons of different color options for their smaller wheels, which tend to be their best sellers. But in surf skating, we tend to gravitate towards bigger wheels, and Spitfire only makes 1 or 2 color options at a time in this radial full 60mm shape. Alright, so how do these Spitfire wheels roll? The roll quality is outstanding. The Spitfire Formula 4 wheels have a premium richness and fullness to the way they feel when they roll. These wheels are so smooth and they're very fast. On smooth surfaces, these wheels are faster than the Powell Dragon 60x42mm wheels. These Spitfire wheels are best suited for mildly rough to smooth surfaces, but because these wheels are a little bit harder than the Powell Dragon wheels, these Spitfires are going to feel less soft and not quite as comfortable on any surface that is not very smooth. I would stay away from any asphalt on these because they're going to be too hard and you'll have a lot of vibrations. But like I said, you can try these out on some mildly rough surfaces and they do work pretty well. So how do these wheels pump just on flat ground? These wheels pump pretty decently on flat ground, but just like the Powell Dragon wheels, these wheels have a tendency of accidentally sliding out if you pump too aggressively. I think the Powell Dragon wheels grip a little bit better than these Spitfire wheels for pumping on flat ground. So how do these wheels slide? Very intuitively. However, the slide is very different from the Powell Dragon wheel. It has a bit of a noisier slide that has these kind of faster vibrations going through it. Whereas the Powell Dragon wheel tends to be a little bit smoother. Or when the Powell Dragon wheels start vibrating, they kind of tend to not vibrate as fast. But these faster vibrations is what makes these Spitfires have this kind of trademark loud barking sound when you slide them. A lot of people enjoy the noisy Spitfire bark as they slide. Personally, I tend to gravitate towards wheels with a quieter slide, but I love these Spitfires so much that I continue to ride them anyway. Alright, so what makes these wheels special? I get tons of speed on those mildly rough to smooth concrete surfaces. And again, they carry momentum incredibly well. They're also very lightweight, again slightly lighter than the Powell Dragon wheels. And personally, I like a lighter weight setup. I tend to get off the ground easier with flyouts and ollie-based maneuvers, and even just rolling and sliding. I can easily tell when I'm on a heavier board, and I enjoy whenever I can lighten my setup with a lighter wheel like these Spitfires. And again, with all that speed and momentum that these Spitfires carry, I generally don't even have to pump on flat ground all that much because they carry their speed so well. Additionally, these wheels have my favorite feeling for grind tricks. There's just a high quality, full, rich feeling and sound, and my grinds carry further on these than any other wheel that I have, including the Powell Dragon wheels. But grind tricks don't feel slippery to me, they feel very controlled. I really wish Spitfire made a side set option for this wheel, just like the Powell Dragon 60x42mm wheel. This wheel being center set causes the wheel to crowd over the hanger more, But my solution is putting 3 washers on each side of my Carver CX hanger. Because the Carver CX trucks have extra axle extending beyond the bearings, which leaves extra room for a few extra axle washers. By putting on these axle washers, it pushes my wheels apart by about 1/4 of an inch, making my hanger a little bit more open for coping grinds. And right away, I notice a difference when I push my wheels further apart, that grind tricks become easier. Alright, so let's talk final thoughts on these Spitfire radial fulls. These wheels are phenomenal for skate park surf skating. They have enough grip for leaning pretty deep. They have such a premium quality urethane that makes for a very nice premium quality ride. These wheels are very fast, they are faster than the Pal Dragon 60x42mm wheels, and they carry that speed better than those Pal Dragons. In my opinion, the most major drawback of these wheels is that they don't have enough grip to pump aggressively, and they will slide out if you pump too hard. Also, as a 97A durometer, these are very comfortable to ride on mildly rough surfaces, but softer wheels, including Pal Dragon 60x42mm wheels, will handle rougher surfaces better than these Spitfires. Okay, so here's a tip. If you're interested in smaller, lighter wheels, such as these Spitfire radial fulls, but say you're coming from a background of riding bigger, softer wheels, such as Surf Skate Love Park and Bowl wheels, Carver Roundhouse Slicks, or Orangutan Fat Freeze, I'd suggest that you try a Pal Dragon wheel first, because that wheel will feel more similar to those bigger, softer wheels, because the Pal Dragon is a noticeably softer formula. But if you've ridden Pal Dragon formula wheels or Slime Ball Snake Vomits and you've enjoyed those wheels, I highly recommend you try these Spitfire 97A Spitfire radial fulls, because this is a fantastic wheel for smooth skate park riding. And they do handle mildly rough surfaces pretty well. Alright, so what about those 58mm 99A conical full Spitfires? So the thing that's interesting about them is the contact patch is actually a little bit narrower than the radial full 97A wheel, but on very smooth, polished concrete surfaces, this 99A actually feels a little bit grippier than the 97A that has a wider contact patch. This really surprised me, because what I'm learning is on very smooth ground, this Spitfire Formula 4 actually gets a little bit grippier as you get into the harder durometers. And I looked this up and I found multiple people who said the same thing. So to me, what that means is that if I'm going to go ride the skate park that's a little further from my house that has very smooth, polished ground, I'm actually going to prefer a harder durometer like the 99 or the 101A for Spitfire radial fulls and conical fulls, because I'm going to get more speed because they're harder and faster, and they actually grip a little bit more. There's something about that 97A Spitfire Formula 4 that tends to glide across ground a little bit more, whereas in that 99A it tends to have a bit more of a Velcro effect. And it just grabs onto that concrete really nicely, which allows me to pump it more aggressively, and I get a faster roll speed. Alright, that's all I've got for this review, and I'll see you in the next one.